have a few slides from the Center for Student Success. Lisa and Susan, we just finished our Student Success Summit. So many of the people on this call, this presentation, have seen a lot of us over the past couple of weeks, but it's always nice to see you again. And so, you can just look away during the slides that you've seen already, but I want to share a few of our updates and just a few things to think about before we head into the meat of the session. So I'm joined by most of my fabulous MCCA team. Precious isn't able to be with us, but Erica and Katie and I are all on this call. There's Erica. And here's the usual disclaimer on how to engage. Please do go ahead and rename yourself to include your college. That's helpful to the presenters when you're speaking, and just all of us to know where you're coming from. We're not a big group today, so you can feel free to unmute yourself if you want to speak, or if it's time to speak, you also can just drop a question in the chat.
Right.
Let's see. Okay. And then also wanted to encourage you to join us on Twitter. Katie is going to be, she's our tweeter in chief, as most of you know, and she will be sharing some thoughts on Twitter, and we would like to invite all of you to do so as well. I know some of you have joined us on Twitter before. So Katie, if you drop the Twitter into the chat, it would be fantastic. A few updates specifically on MIStart2Finish. I know I have kind of opened this up to for faculty to join beyond MIStart2Finish, but I do want to give updates for those of you who are MIStart2Finish leads. The validation calls for the DevEd Scale of Adoption Assessment have started. And so if you have not signed up, please remind your college lead, who has received many emails from me, to sign up by Friday for a time between now and October 16th. I do want to try to get these wrapped up because we are then starting our scale of adoption calls for the guided pathways and MyBest, and 2 at a time is a lot. 3 at a time is crazy. For those of you who joined us at our VFA for Developmental Education webinar 2 weeks ago today, that recording and the slides are posted on our event site, and you might find some of that information interesting as you start working on your developmental redesign. And then we have a MIStart2Finish faculty roundtable coming up on October 20th. And as you remember, those faculty roundtables are an opportunity for faculty to just get together informally, perhaps debrief some things from this series, which will, part 2 will happen next week, but also just kind of talk about what's going on in your developmental classes, especially since we've moved so much online. I think there'll be plenty to talk about. I also wanted to point out to you that the Michigan Reconnect Act was funded in the state budget. And we expect students to begin enrolling under Public Act 84 by spring or summer 2021. So it won't be immediately, but it will be coming up. And they're, relevant to MIStart2Finish. There are some parameters around providing developmental education and placing students in developmental education that are expected to be in place by January 2022. So I wanted to point that out to you. This is the breaking news. Oh, I messed up my slides. But anyway, yes, that is a piece of breaking news. You will be expected to provide for Michigan Reconnect students your developmental education either in a co-rec model, a compression model where students enroll in 2 or more courses in the same semester, or a modularization model, which breaks up the content and allows students to complete just those modules that apply to their gateway courses, or in an independent model of the institution's own choosing. But that independent model would need to be provided at no charge. So if you, you might be thinking about how you're planning to do that. I don't know yet, but I'm assuming that we will hear how Leo is expecting that we will report on how we're delivering that, those different models. So expect to hear more from me about that, but also just, you know, kind of wrap your head around those expectations. We haven't made a big deal about them. They've been in the act that was signed last spring, but since there was no funding, we didn't expect that there would be, you know, that there'd be any thoughts around enforcement. But now that there is funding, we have to expect that they will turn back to some of these parameters that they laid out. And so I wanted to just highlight that for you guys. And then some other things, some other highlights from the Autumn of Equity, which I think I thought it was cute when I thought of it. And then I just want to make, every time I say it, I want to make sure that everyone knows that we're not just doing equity in the autumn. We will be doing equity year round. But we do have a lot of events, including this series, which I'm excited about starting today. We have a webinar with our friends from the National Center for Inquiry and Improvement on October 7th. They've developed a set of fantastic conversation tools around equity that you can be used in many circumstances and by many individuals within colleges. You can register for these on your old friend, the MCCA.org events page. We also will be repeating our we'll be continuing our Twitter Tuesdays at the end of October and November with 2 tweet chats that will focus on equity, and we're going to be drawing topics probably from the series that we're working on today, that we're starting today, about inclusive teaching and other events that we had as part of the summit that we had a lot of talks about equity. So look forward to hearing more about that as we kind of narrow down what we're gonna chat about, but mark your calendar for those noon tweet chats on the Twitter Tuesdays. Finally, I wanted to, because I've got faculty on this, I wanted to talk about our faculty connections roundtables, and some of you were part of one of these roundtables over the summer. We have put together a publication which is on the MCSS website about the faculty roundtable series and faculty engagement through the Center for Student Success in general. And then we're continuing the faculty roundtables this fall. We're not going to do them by discipline specifically, but we're going to do them by theme. So we're going to talk about, these are also noon roundtables, and we're going to talk about hands-on learning in the virtual world. How do you create connected communities? And how do you hack the system for ideas that work? So we'll be combining cross-disciplinary conversation, and then we will, depending on the number of people who join the roundtables, we may be doing some subject-specific breakouts as well. Hang on just a second.
Sorry, Jenny, that's me being annoying.
That's you. You're checking a tweet. I'll be right with you. So I think that's it. If you have questions for me, this is the time to ask them. Katie has a question for me, so I'm going to answer it. And at the same time, I am going to go ahead and stop my share and transition to our presenters, Lisa and Susan. So Susan, I am making you the host right now.
Susan, is that looking okay?
Looks good to me.
All right, you're able to see my title slide then. Great. All right. Welcome, everyone. I am thrilled to be invited to be part of today's work. I'm Lisa Brown. I'm with the Charles A. Dana Center. And I have been here at the center for about 15 years, and my work centers primarily around professional learning for higher education faculty, although I spent many years in the K-12 space as well, and specifically working around middle school mathematics. And I have many fond memories of summers at Michigan State training other faculty from around the country who were using a particular curriculum that I was involved with at the time. So, and I also want to give space for my colleague Susan to introduce herself. She's serving as our tech facilitator today, but she does many other things beyond that. Go ahead, Susan.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us here today. Yeah, I work at the Dana Center with Lisa. I work mostly on the K-12 side, but work in the transition space into higher ed. So most of my projects are with that transition from high school into college, focusing on math, pathways, and things like that. I'm happy to, hopefully tech will work well, and you won't be able to blame me for logistical problems. So hopefully it'll all be smooth.
Yes, we certainly hope so. Susan and I did not coordinate our outfits today. We just both happened to wear purple, but anyway. All right, I want to talk just a tiny bit about the Dana Center. I think most of you on this call are familiar with Dana Center, but just in case we have anyone who's new, I just thought I would just say a few things about us. We have about 70 folks at the Dana Center across both our K-12 and higher ed work. The second thing we want you to know about us is that we bring an equity lens toward our work to ensure access to high quality, relevant math and science education. Today's topic is not restricted to math and science. And so we share topics like this also with teachers of other disciplines. So, and the Dana Center has been around for about 30 years. So I've been around for about half of it, and Susan's been around for almost all of it. So not quite though. I forget how many years, Susan.
I can't keep track. I took a break in the middle, so it makes the addition and subtraction a little complicated.
Oh, okay. Well, I consider Susan a mentor of sorts for myself because she's been here at the Dana Center for so long and been a huge help to me. So anyway, we just want to welcome all of you, and we'll be giving you all a time to tell us a little bit more about yourselves in a few minutes. As you know, we're part of, or we're the sort of creators of the Dana Center Math Pathways project. And these are just a quick reminder of our vision. You've seen these before, but just as a touchstone for us, we're really focused on the preparedness of students, specifically with mathematics, making that timely progression, and feeling supported and empowered as learners. And today's focus is really on that third part of the vision, is how can we better empower our students as learners? How can we better support them as faculty? So our goals for our time together, and this includes our time together next week, is to really investigate some cultural frameworks for teaching and learning and how we might use those to impact the teaching and learning that we're enacting in our classrooms. And then we'll be talking about how can we incorporate some of these practices to better support our efforts at equitable teaching and learning. This is a set of norms we often use at the Dana Center. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. I'm going to give you a chance to read them, and then maybe after you've read them, pick one to focus on for today. So I'll give you 30 seconds or so. Read through those as a reminder, or if they're not, just to familiarize yourself with them, and then select one that you want to focus on for today. And you can drop that into the chat. Sorry about that. I did not mean to advance. Thank you for these responses, Dawn, Chelsea, Sean, Jenny, Erica, Lauren, James. Shanna or Shauna, I'm sorry if I'm getting your name incorrect. Sam, Christina, thank you. All right. This is a great start. All right. What we want to do is learn a little bit more about you all. And so we're going to do that by way of each of us creating a brief slide that tells a little bit about ourselves. I'm going to end the slideshow and I'm going to navigate to this slide deck. Susan's going to drop the link, there it goes right there, into the chat. And so let me move some things out of the way. Are y'all able to see my slide? Okay, great. All right. Your slide does not have to be like by my slide, okay? So I basically want you to consider just a few questions, like tell us a little bit about your cultural background if you feel comfortable doing that. Tell us why you why you decided to join this series. What are you bringing into this space? Everyone is bringing something here. So tell us a little bit about what you're bringing into today's conversation and forward into next week's conversation. And how does this align with the work that you're doing? And this could be at your institution, in your classroom, in your community, in your service work, in your faith community, what have you, right? So how does this align? And you can do this through words or images. It doesn't matter. So we're going to give you, I'm going to start with like 5 minutes. So go ahead and create your slide. And then as time allows, we'll do a little time check. In fact, I'm going to set a timer for myself. And if we need to allow a little bit more time for this, we can. All right. And again, you do not have to do this with words. You can do this with pictures or sketches, whatever works for you. Any questions? No, everybody's already at it. Okay. All right. All right, folks, let's do a time check. Hold up with fingers, the number of more minutes you need. You'll have to show your video though. I'm seeing between 4 and 2. We're going for 3. All right, 3 more minutes. Y'all can do this. I have full confidence. If you're done, check out some of the others because there's a ton of interesting stuff here.
If anyone's having trouble with the link, feel free to send me a private chat or drop it into chat. I see about 17 people in the document. We have 21 participants. So if you're having trouble, please reach out.
Thanks, Susan. All right, folks, finish the word or sentence you're on, and we'll come back together. All right, this was great. I'm just going to call out a couple of things, just words that stood out for me from folks' aspirations for today or things about their culture. Someone has 12 siblings. Someone else wrote, I work for students. One of us is working on their dissertation. Whew. At least one of us has international teaching experience. Someone mentioned equity-mindedness, which will inform some of our work today. Someone else said something about having an open mind. Are there other words or phrases that you all want to call out that stood out for you? Just unmute. I know y'all aren't shy. We're all educators here. No? There's such thing as shy educators, it's true. But this many? All right. Okay. Well, thank you for creating those slides, and you're welcome to update them between now and next time. And we'll ask folks who join us next time to make one before the next session. So for the folks that couldn't make it today. So someone had mentioned equity mindedness, and that's going to really inform our conversations for today. How many of you are familiar with equity mindedness? This is the work of the Center for Urban Education out of the University of Southern California, Rozier campus. So I'm just curious, how many of you are familiar with that? I see some thumbs up. Okay. And some people I can't quite tell because you're not sharing your screen view, but that's okay. All right, a few of you are familiar with that, which is good. But I do want to say a bit more about it. And so these gears represent the equity-minded principles that are embedded in the sort of equity-minded in the equity-mindedness. These are the 5 principles that inform it.
Lisa, I'm gonna,
yes.
for a second, we're not seeing your screen.
Thank you, because I can see it. It looks great.
And I
but
see
that's not good. Okay, all right, let me try again.
Yeah.
Thank you. How about now?
Nope, just seeing you.
Oh, I know what the problem is. I think I know what the problem is. You have to actually share your screen in order for people to see it.
There's usually a blue button that says actually here.
Zoom 101. Yeah.
You're good.
Sorry about that, folks. Okay. I'm caught between wanting to see what you guys are doing and what I want to share. So how about that now, Susan? Okay, so here are the gears, those of you who haven't seen them before. So I want to go over what each of those represents. So when we're talking about these gears, these are the principles that inform equity mindedness. So the first principle is really thinking about the perspective of being race conscious. And in that case, we're talking about being race conscious in an affirmative sense. The second one is around being systemically aware. And in particular around the sort of socio-political context of the United States. So as equity-minded practitioners, we're encouraged to learn as much as we can about sort of the history of exclusionary practices in education in this country. The third principle of equity-mindedness is around evidence-based, gathering evidence. It's critical that we gather evidence, and not only gather evidence, but really look at it very carefully in order to question the assumptions that we may be making about our students. And it's especially important that we disaggregate the data as much as possible so that we can ask ourselves, which of the students are we not serving well? And then the fourth principle of equity-mindedness is to view our inequities. When we identify those inequities, if we're going through that evidence base and we're recognizing those inequities, we don't blame the students for those. We view those inequities as problems of practice within our institution. So that's what equity-mindedness, that particular principle, is addressing. And the last one is around taking action. Equity-minded practitioners are taking action to address those inequities within their institutions and within their classrooms. These are some of the actions that are recommended by our colleagues at the Center for Urban Education. I'll give you a moment to read those. And in today's work, we will be applying some of these specific actions today. We're going to be doing some assessment of our own practices this afternoon. And as part of that, it may cause us to question some of the assumptions that we've been making, or we may recognize a particular stereotype that we hold that might not have been known to us before. Those are just a few of them. I just want to call out a couple of them that are aligned to today's session. Now I want to ask you all, though, this session is about culturally responsive and sustaining teaching and learning. I'm going to put forward a few definitions in a few moments, but I want to know, what do you think first? All right. So reflect on this question for a moment. You do not have to share this out with the group, but what I want you to consider is, what does it mean to you, and in what ways might it support the students that you are serving? I will put you in breakout rooms to have some discussion about this, but you don't have to share all of this. So some of this may be things, I do want you to say what it means to you, and if possible, tell us how you might think it would support the students that you're serving. So make a few notes to yourself. I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to respond to those two questions. Then we'll place you in a breakout room so that you can discuss and share and learn about other people's perspectives. So I'm going to set a little timer. Just take a few notes on those two questions. All right, about 30 more seconds. All right. What we want to do next is have an opportunity to share some of these initial ideas in a breakout group.
Okay, so Lisa, we've just brought everybody back from their breakout rooms, and I was just going to ask them to start with their share out. So I am looking at slide 12 with the share out. If you want to, I haven't said anything more than that.
All right. So I'd just like for one of those groups, your reporter, to volunteer and just share common theme. Just share one common theme, and then we'll go through each of the groups, and each group shares one common theme. Then we'll go in reverse order back through the groups and hear about any significant divergences as they arose. Who wants to go first? And I can't hear your name, so if you'll say it, please. So sorry. I mean, I can't see you, so if you'll say your name, that would be helpful to me.
So this is Janice from Group 2, and I would say a common theme that came up was listening to your students.
Thank you. Thank you, Janice. Who's next? Another group. Common theme.
This is Dawn Prakowski from OCC. And Vanita and I came up with a good common theme among ours was empathy.
All right. Thanks, Dawn. Another group.
I don't remember the name of our group, sorry, but we talked about a few divergent themes, but one that sort of is all encompassing is an idea of cultural awareness.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so the themes were, we talked a lot about both perpetuating equity-minded culture in the classroom, wanting to feel like the instructor was treating students equitably, but then also wanting students to feel equitably treated. And then also a third component to that was students learning skills for kind of cultural awareness and equity-mindedness themselves to move into their future lives.
Oh, I like that focus from both perspectives. Thank you. Another group.
This is Jim Pippin from OCC. I don't remember what our group was either, but Christopher and I kind of piggybacking on that last comment, but one of the themes that came up was just the fact that we're all learners, so not just the students, but instructors ourselves. And we're all learning the best ways to modify our language and our classroom environments to be inclusive and to serve everyone.
Outstanding. Thank you. Another group?
That might have been, I think that might be all of our groups. Is that true, or is there a group missing? I think we have 5 groups.
This is Erica from Group 5. I guess one thing that we'll share that we talked about was really drawing upon what our students know and kind of leaving space for them to use their lived experiences.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Erica.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Are there any other groups? Then, Erica, is there a divergence that surfaced in your group? And so we'll go in kind of reverse order as much as possible and get everyone else a chance to share any diverging perspectives that arose.
I don't know that we had diverging perspectives. We ended up shifting a bit to the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor's new grading policy this semester, and withdrawal policy. We kind of shifted to that and all, kind of started thinking about the equity implications of that. So got us off track a little.
Someone's going to have to share an article with me so we can catch up between next week. Thanks, Erica.
Yeah, it's interesting.
All right. Yeah, it sounds like it. Okay, another divergence. One of the other groups, did you have a significant divergence to share?
Hey, Lisa, before
Yes.
this is Jenny. I just wanted to say you could try again. I changed the setting on the meeting. So you can
Okay. All right. I think I will do that at the next time when I have folks working. Does that sound okay?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So we have like 2 or 3 activities that we're going to have you all do, and we'll be moving into that next activity fairly soon. So, and then I'll try again to get in, and that way I can see your faces, be better engaged. So, thank you though, Jenny. I appreciate that. We'll give that a shot in a few minutes. Okay, other divergences.
Lisa, what do you mean by divergences? Do you mean points of conflict in our conversations or things that might be different from what was already shared?
Different. Yeah, so I'm looking for common themes, but then if there's something that really stood out that was quite different that you think the group would benefit from hearing, that's what I mean by the significant divergences. And thank you for suggesting more clarification.
I guess
So
from that end, oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Nope.
sorry. Go ahead, Katie.
No, Janice, you go.
So Katie's clarification question actually changes my answer. What I would share then, one of the things that hasn't been mentioned yet, that it's a little bit different, is sort of the instructor's role in providing students with that exposure, with a method to be exposed to different cultures. And, you know, especially because I'm in the math and sciences area, you know, a lot of times they think it's very numerical. There's that much like the social sciences, but there is still a responsibility there. And there's one example was that, you know, now that everybody's online, most of our teachers have introduced yourself to the class as the first activity, which may or may not have happened in the first class when we were on campus. So there's this getting to know each other, the teacher and the students and other students. So I don't know if that was really divergent, but different.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. Yep.
Also,
Any others?
helpful that you clarified, because it wasn't a point of conflict, but it was something that hasn't been brought up yet, sort of under the tones, I guess, undertones. We talked about how big and diverse the geography of Michigan is a little bit, and how equity has different implications for some of our smaller, more rural campuses. While racial equity is still a concern, there are usually more issues with socioeconomic equity. And so we talked a little bit about all the different ways that background should not be a barrier, both from a racial equity perspective, but also from a socioeconomic perspective. We talked a little bit about the idea of privilege and how that relates to and is different from notions around equity and needs to sort of be level set a little bit in the classroom.
Yeah, thank you. I have worked in Michigan a time or two, and I've had some perspective similar to that shared with me in the past. Thank you. Yeah. Other perspectives.
Lisa, I'm going to read one because I'm not sure if you can see chats, but I thought it was interesting that of UM's policy special to COVID grading and pass-fail and concerns about transferability that apply to community college students more than UM students. So another interesting point that I'm just not sure you can see.
So I'm really interested in what that is, because I just feel this nervousness. I didn't know there was a grading change. So Erica,
well, we may have to set aside some time next time to digest that a little bit after everyone's had a chance to take a look between now and next week. Since it does seem to have far-reaching implications. All right, I was going to move on to sharing a few quotes from some of the primary researchers around culturally responsive and sustaining pedagogy. And Susan, if you can advance to the next slide. These are just, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just saying they're there.
Okay, good. These are just, there are a lot of folks who have been involved over the years in researching these topics and also researching what are the practices that we can implement in our classrooms. And so I put these different perspectives together to add to the meaning making that you all made in your small groups. So I'm going to give you a moment to read those. And just for some additional context, Gloria Ladson-Billings is one of the original researchers on these topics. She's at Stanford. Geneva Gay is also contemporary with Gloria Ladson-Billings. She's at the University of Washington, Seattle. Catherine Ye is from Chapman University. And Louise Small is from the University of Arizona. So it's just a little bit about their institutions, but I'm giving you a chance to read these different ways of describing this sort of field of inquiry and research. And I'm hoping you may see some connections there with some of what you all shared. I think I heard people talking about cultural knowledge of their students and also the institution. I don't think anyone mentioned funds of knowledge, but that perspective is that students are bringing with them specific strengths. They have a fund or a bank of cultural knowledge or community knowledge or mathematical knowledge, and that we can connect to, knowing that they're bringing their own funds of knowledge with them. Now, when we think about our own perspective, and this is true, I think, for most educators, this is from the work of Harris and Wood. They're at San Diego State University. They've been doing a lot of equity-minded and culturally affirming webinars throughout the pandemic and have been a real lifeline, especially for faculty who are new to this set of ideas. And one of the things that they highlighted early on in the pandemic, as we thought about how can we be more culturally responsive or be more sustaining of students' cultures in our pedagogy, they reminded us that we teach the way we were taught, and that for the most part, we ignore the diversity that we don't see. So as practitioners of culturally responsive and sustaining pedagogy, we have to keep in mind that those present a bit of a blind spot for us. And if we can be mindful of that, then we're going to be able to see more of the diversity that exists, because we know that we don't necessarily see it with our eyes. So what we want to do next is to really get into the heart of some of the best work that I've come across over the years of having studied this topic for the last several years, to help understand the issues around culturally responsive and sustaining pedagogy by first thinking about what is it that we value with respect to culture in the work that we are doing. And so, Susan, if you'll advance 2 slides. So we're going to be talking about something that these authors call cultural frameworks. And the authors describe it in the way specified here on this slide. So take a moment to read that. And then I'm going to share some examples. So the challenge around culture is what we can see culturally is such a tiny fraction of what exists culturally. And so, Susan, if you'll advance to the next slide, one of the resources that we came across several years ago here at the Dana Center that really caught our attention is a book by author Alicia Chavez and her colleague Susan Longerbeam. And their book, Teaching Across Cultural Strengths, they talk first about the nature of culture. So in the largest circle here are things that are observable. But beneath that initial layer of what's observable are people's beliefs, what it is that people accept as being true. So for example, I believe that I am responsible for making sure that my students learn, but you wouldn't know that about me if I didn't share that with you, right? And then that even further internal layer is the conscious expression of our values, right? And they vary widely in the way they are expressed. Some people's values are expressed verbally, but many other people's values are expressed in nonverbal ways. For example, the way in which people engage in eye contact or not. And then another layer there is around the sort of social roles, the expectations, Most of this is unconscious stuff that is coming from our upbringing. And sometimes we don't even know about those norms until we break them. So I was one of those people that when growing up, I never seemed to understand what the rules were, but I was constantly breaking them. That's how I learned about them. And then that final internal layer, all the underlying assumptions. And these are all taken for granted things. They are often not visible at all. So we have to keep in mind when we're thinking about culture in particular, that there are many layers to culture and that much of it is really difficult for us to truly know about. But when we are having some kind of issue where we're looking at another person's culture and trying to grapple with those differences, we have to recognize that there's a lot inside of different ways in which people express themselves, or the values that they hold, and a lot of that is unknown to us, but they are still there. Those underlying assumptions are still there. So what Longerbeam and Chavez did is they put together, they thought about two ways of, like a continuum of behaviors, beliefs, assumptions, and priorities, and all of these are related to one or more aspects, rather, of teaching and learning. So Susan, if you could go to that next slide that has the image of the two arrows.
Got it? And are you ready?
Everyone. Yeah, and so this slide is really hard. I'm sorry, Susan, were you going to talk about sharing a link?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So this slide has tons of text on it and it's too tiny to see. So Susan's going to share that link and it'll take you to a multi-page document and you can navigate to, I think, page 3 of that document.
The link is there and the slide is up.
All right. So this particular framework, this set of frameworks that these researchers came up with, is heavily researched over years of interviews with faculty and with students about how they approach teaching and learning. And from those extensive interviews over years, they developed this set of continua. And they look at those continua across several different sort of factors of teaching and learning. For example, the importance of time, and so on. And so what they found is that some students have an approach, and this is true for teachers as well, some of us have an approach that they call an individuated approach, where people's worldviews or their beliefs about learning sort of come from a private space or a compartmental space or more individualized, and so on. And other people are approaching teaching and learning more from an integrated worldview and belief about how we learn that's more focused on interconnectedness, mutuality, reflecting contextually, and I'm sorry, I'm having trouble with my own screen being able to read, but and dependent on conception of the world is on contextually dependent. I'm sorry. So these two differences, they view those along a continuum. So it's not the case necessarily that you're just either one or the other, but it's probably the case that you lean in one direction or the other. And so one of the ways that we've engaged with these particular frameworks is to create, to think about those things on a continuum and to examine the different, oh, this is the slide I was looking for, sorry, slide 19. That one's easier to read, yeah. And so those are the two perspectives, but again, they're on a continuum. And then they look at those perspectives across a number of frameworks. So if we can go to slide 20. So we're looking at purpose of learning, ways that we process information, how interconnected things are being learned, how the interconnectedness of what is being learned, responsibility, and so on. For each of these frameworks, the handout that you have will describe each framework and give you a little bit of an example of what those differences are between individuated and integrated perspectives. And our recommendation is to read over those and to position yourself as best you can on each of those. And if you'll go to the next slide. So in your handout set, you're going to have an image that has all of those frameworks together. And what I recommend you do, and if you can go to slide 22, Susan, what I recommend that you do is maybe imagine a line right down the middle of that gray middle space, and then place yourself as if it were on a continuum. So for me, when I think about the purpose of learning, the two descriptions there, the one that's on the left is more true for me. In my upbringing, knowledge and individual competence is for the betterment of humanity, is more of what my family taught me than the one on the right, where wisdom, betterment, and lives of those with whom we are connected, whether that be our family, our tribal community, or some other community in which we're living. So I put myself a little bit over to the left. And in some cases on these continuum, you might find yourself right in the middle, or you may find yourself far to the left or far to the right. So what we want you to do is assess yourself briefly, and then after you've had a chance to look at all 7 of the frameworks, figure out what your mean is there. You know, are you more toward individuated after you've looked at all 7 of them, or are you more toward an integrated perspective after you look at all 7 of them? So let me see if there are questions about those directions. So we're going to give you a chance to do your own assessing relative to these frameworks. And then in a few minutes, we will put you in a breakout group. And so are there any questions?
Just one comment. So far, I can only see 3.
Yes. So the rest of, good point. Thank you. I'm sure other people are having that same wondering. The rest of them are, if you follow the link that Susan put in the chat,
Okay.
it should take you to a document that's multi-page. And I think this one is on page 3.
Yeah, I can.
Is that right, Susan?
I'm going to do a new share. So now you should.
Okay, good.
It's page 5.
Seeing that document.
Thank you.
Page 5. So this is the document. If you scroll down to page 5, you'll see the things that we were talking about, but on page 5 is the full chart.
Mm-hmm. So let me suggest, let's take, we're going to start with 8 minutes for this, and then we'll do a time check with you all.
All right. Those of you that said you didn't have the link, I see Katie put it back in. Is everybody good, or?
I think everybody's back now.
Are we? Yeah.
All right.
Welcome back.
Thanks. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm imagining your beautiful faces. And so we've got 3 questions to debrief, and we have about 15 minutes left with one another. So we're going to hustle through and get a few of your perspectives. So Jenny, who's in group 1?
Dawn, Gwendolyn, and Tamra.
Okay, who's your reporter? And the reporter will share out one perspective on one of the questions, dealer's choice.
Ooh,
Ooh,
okay.
dealer's choice. I love it.
This is Dawn. I was the reporter. So, oh goodness. Okay, I'll go with the what surprises you. Tamara brought up a really good point that coming from a science background, the individual side was definitely leaned more towards the individual side versus Gwendolyn and I come from more of like a counseling and social work background, which felt very heavy on the integrated side. And there was almost like a negative feeling towards the individuated side.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. There are a couple of vignettes in the book from which I drew these ideas that say that exact thing. It's very interesting. All right. Thank you, Group 1 and Dawn. Jenny, Group 2.
Group 2 has James, Janice, and Katie.
So
All
Jim,
right.
Katie, and myself were all to speak out last time, so we didn't really assign anyone. But I guess one of the things that surprised us is that it wasn't necessarily all left or all to the right of the spectrum. And then it felt like it could change over time or with the role that we were thinking of. None of us is primarily faculty, so we had a very interesting group. And I agree with the previous comment about the science. I'm from a math discipline, and to me, that thinking math ways, very individual, you know, very left on there. But now that I'm taking leadership, I'm working on my doctorate in leadership, well, though, that thought's more to the right.
Interesting. Yeah. All right. Thanks. Group 3.
Group 3 has Christina, Shauna, and Vanita.
Hi. I'm going to be the reporter for our group. What surprised, two of us were integrated. One of us was in between, where it was a little bit of both. And I think this was definitely helpful. It opened our eyes to really view our students in ways that we would not have done. I actually shared my perspective coming from a collectivist culture. I definitely filled in a lot of spaces for the integrated. And when I was reading the individualized, I said, oh, this is so individualistic. And I thought to myself, okay, we have students in the classroom that also come, and how can I make them feel part? So it was really interesting to see that. I like Shauna shared a great story too, and she talked about how her community was more about the campus community that helped her in being where she is today. More so the family was there, they supported, but it was the campus folks that actually helped her when she was growing up. So it was really interesting to see that. And Christina shared something was it's about being active in their learning, and how this is basically helping in that. So if I missed out on anything, Christina, Shauna, you can chime in. Thank you.
8.
Thank you. All right.
And room 4. Oh,
Yes, go ahead, Jenny. Yeah.
oh, sure. So room 4, we have Chelsea and Sean.
Hi. So I probably preface and point out that not only are Chelsea and I friends, we're both English professors. So and we both landed on the integrated side, like whole ham. So that kind of like confirms everything that everyone else is saying about stuff. On the surprise, like sort of surprise side, like I don't think either of us were super sort of like surprised by things, but looking at it, we kind of thought it was interesting we started to dissect the document itself and looking at how there was a lot of conversation about an emphasis on family, when that may not necessarily, in thinking of both of our sort of experiences growing up and instances, that it maybe wasn't always a necessarily true family type thing that it pushed us in that direction. It's just sort of something that kind of naturally happened. So we kind of thought that was sort of surprising on how that document was kind of laid out. And then we also got into conversations of kind of wanting to do this with our developmental students to kind of see
I'll make
if
it
they
through.
can kind of figure out where they land in that kind of spectrum.
Thank you. What an interesting idea. I got to think about that. That's great. All right. This has been very helpful, and I wish we had more time. I'd like to discuss all of the questions, but we have our time together next week as well. And so I do want you to hang on to those artifacts from today, your record of where you viewed yourself on those continua. And we're also archiving this webinar and the chat and so on, so we have those artifacts as well. Susan's going to share with you a very brief vignette that comes from the Teaching Across Cultural Strengths book. And I want to give you, it's a short read, so I'd like to just give you a moment to read that vignette, and then I want you to be prepared. We call this protocol say something. So in a say something setting, what we give you is a brief reading, and ordinarily you would stand up, maybe make eye contact with someone across the room and go over and each of you say something about the reading. We're not going to be able to do that here, so instead we're going to do so through a what we call a waterfall chat. So everyone's going to say something at the same time in a few moments. So read the vignette, and then you can enter your say something in the chat, but don't submit it until everyone's ready and we submit them all at once.
Okay.
Have y'all done those before? That kind of a,
No.
people call it different things. My friend from Kalamazoo calls it a waterfall chat because they all fall at the same time. Okay, so you'll read the vignette and then be prepared to say something in the chat, and Susan will signal that since she can see you all for when you'll hit submit on those say somethings.
Drop the link in, and I'm going to go ahead and switch the share to it for any of those of you that might have trouble with the link. So the vignette will also be on my screen. As you're finishing reading, you can go ahead and queue up your chat to type something that you want to say about this vignette, but don't hit enter until I queue you up. What do we think? Will we be ready in 30 seconds? Give me a thumbs up if 30 seconds works. All right, so we'll give you 30 seconds. All right, I'm showing my 30 seconds. Does anybody need more time so we don't leave somebody out of our waterfall? You should have something written in chat, and I'm going to count us down on a 3, 2, 1 in a minute, and we'll hit enter. Give me a big wave if you are like, no, stop. Okay, I see a thumbs up. All right, I'm not seeing any big stops, so I'm going to count down to 3, 2, 1, and then you're going to hit enter, and everything should drop into chat. Ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Nice. All right, Lisa, so we've got
All
a lot
right.
in chat that folks can read.
If you want to reply to someone, just at them and then make a comment if you want. But do take a moment to look at the different perspectives represented there. And again, we'll be keeping these artifacts so that we'll all have access to them. All right, I'm going to move us on. So we looked at 8 frameworks for thinking about our teaching and from different perspectives: responsibility for learning, role of the teacher, sequencing, etc. What I want us to do next time we're together is spend some time workshopping each of these 8 continua. So what I want you to do is pick 3 that you're interested in talking with others about and brainstorming possible ways to have a more balanced perspective on each of these continua. So for example, it may be the case that a lot of people have a more individuated perspective with respect to time, as was the case in the vignette, the example that I gave you. So if that were the perspective, and you were more on the individuated side, how would you move along that continuum so that your perspective was more balanced? So that's what our goal is next week, is how do we get more balance in our perspectives so that we can meet more students where they are with respect to their own cultural perspectives, viewpoints, and so on. So what I want you to do is, and this one, you can just private chat this to Susan, but tell us 3 of the 8 that you would be most interested in working with others on. So private chat Susan 3 of those continua that you're interested in working on, and we'll do our best to sort of match folks up that have similar interests. All right, Susan, do we have most everybody here?
Yeah, about 8. There's a couple more coming in, but
Okay, good. All right.
go ahead and finish putting those in. There, the last couple are coming in, but I think, yeah, we're getting pretty close.
Okay, good. I don't want to run us over, so I'm going to briefly describe the preparation between now and next time. So Susan, if you could share slide 28, I've got some great questions to help you reflect on today's experience. So that is the content there on slide 28 shares that we will send all this to you also in a follow-up email, but we just have a few reflection questions, and then we have an optional preparation activity, which is, I really think in order, and this is true for those of us at the Dana Center, we did a book study and we took ourselves through all of these same activities. And we did reflect on those kinds of questions. And the other thing we all did, especially those of us on the higher ed team, we wrote our own kind of autobiography of our sort of cultural perspectives with respect to teaching. And so we have a document that you can go to there, and I have to say most of us spent hours on this, but I'm just suggesting that you spend maybe 30 or 45 minutes sort of exploring a little bit about your own background with respect to culture and those continua. So, so one of those we are hoping everyone can do, which is do the individual reflection from slide 28, and then the culture of teaching autobiography is optional. We also have a slide with the key references. We reference a lot of material here, but those are the ones that were most prominent. And then the slide 31 is just a quick preview of what we're doing next time. So we're going to be sharing out our ideas, and we'll be grouping you according to the interests that you had that you expressed in the chat about how we can move toward more balanced. And then I'm going to be sharing with you relative to each of the continua, very specific research-based recommendations, and we'll look at the sort of alignment between those and the ideas that you all come up with. And again, next week we'll really get down to very specific details about actions that you can take as individuals, but also collectively or institutions or across this particular network. I want to thank all of you for your kind attention today, and especially your patience with the technical challenges that we've experienced. We hope that we won't have those same we doubt that we'll have those same problems next week. Anyway, and we will hang around for a few minutes afterwards if you have any specific questions. I'm also curious if anybody, never mind, I'll save it for later. Anyway, but we'll hang around afterwards if any of you have any additional questions. Thank you for your time. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Just want to chime in and thank you